Serious, have you ever purposefully tried to get revenge on someone, only to realize it hurt them way worse than you intended? If so, what did you do? Girl at school kept telling her friends my sister was a whore. I accidentally spilled chili on her new shirt. Turns out her gram had just died, and they had went shopping for that shirt together like the week before, making it the last thing she ever gave her. She was out of school for about a month for personal stuff, and, TBF, my sister is a complete whore. My friend was on the bus waiting to leave school. Younger kid was being mouthy and pissing people off, so my friend said something along the lines of, "God, your parents must hate you." Turns out the kid was an orphan. We had one person in our group in university who was not pulling his weight. He would submit things translated from different languages that were not in English. He would submit them without any references, and he would never attend meetings. Looking back, he was probably just out of his means, but it didn't feel like he was even trying. My group decided, on a day he didn't come to class to, we assumed, purposely avoid a meeting we had planned for right after, to tell him we had had a very large test that he had missed. We just sent some messages in the group chat saying that was a hard test, and does anyone know how much that was weighted? I know I failed. One look at the course outline, and you could see we had not had a test. He dropped the class the next day. I was in grade 8, we had this new kid named Caleb moved to our town. He came from a rough home in a different city, and had been sent to live with his aunt and uncle in our small little town. Anyways, he managed to fit in pretty well and became friends with most of the boys in fairly short order. So, one day at recess, all the boys are playing basketball outside on a cement pad with hoops at either end. Caleb, hoping to show off how tough he is, decides to start not playing by the rules. He's committing hard fouls, literally punching other kids in the arm when they went up for shots. He missed one time and punched a kid in the face. And he says, "What, we're playing by street rules." A couple days later, he's still doing this and still using the same excuses. We've all told him to stop and play normal, but he won't. So I decide it's time to teach him a lesson. I get the ball right under the hoop, fake like I'm going up for the shot to get him off his feet. Then I bend at the hips and get really low. His knees basically come in contact with my side, and he does a full flip and lands flat on his ass. I stand back up, make my shot, and say street rules, right? It's at this point I notice he's actually in quite a lot of pain. Turns out he broke his tailbone. But when he recovered, you better damn well believe he played basketball by the rules.
My sister always called me unwanted, so I took her kids from her. I have 3 older siblings, Josh and twins Kate and Emma. I was an oops baby after my father's vasectomy reversed itself years later, which is rare but does happen. I'm only close to Emma. She thought it was really fun to have a baby sister. Josh was indifferent to me, and Kate really resented me. I had some big health issues which cost a lot of money. Kate and Emma had to start sharing a room, so I had a nursery. Until she moved out for college, Kate constantly complained about how me being born ruined everything since she had to share the room and my parents couldn't afford the life she used to have. She always used to tell me I don't count as a sibling, only Josh and Emma do. She got a bit less mean after she got older and went to college, but resentment has clearly lingered, and I overheard her as recently as last year criticizing my mother for not aborting it because she had to settle for a cheaper college because of that sister none of us asked for. Kate is now married and her husband is deployed. They have 3 kids, who I'll call by their ages, 6F, 4 male and 2 male. She tells her kids not to call me auntie. I never see them, only when it's things like my parents' birthdays. In May, my favorite member of my favorite band did a solo tour and I was lucky enough to get tickets for the last show in my city. When I was lined up for security at the show, Kate called me. She never calls me, but I answered worried about my parents. She was like, "Thank fucking God," and told me I needed to go to her house ASAP and babysit 6 and 2 because 4 was at the hospital to get an appendectomy and they're alone. Our parents and Emma were away on separate holiday and Josh lives across the country. I said I can't because I'm at the concert. I didn't want to leave, as it was the only show I got a ticket to and I've wanted to see his solo songs live for years. She started telling me how I am family and that sisters need to step up to the plate and help each other out. I lost it with her and told her that she doesn't get to pull that line on me after spending my entire childhood telling me I'm not her sister. She said I am endangering her kids by leaving for some gay little K-pop boy. I told her she should call someone she doesn't wish was aborted and to leave me alone because she's made it clear she doesn't see me as a sister or an aunt to her kids, so I'm not going to do her a favor at the expense of something important to me. I put my phone on DND and enjoyed the concert. After I left, my phone had been blown up by all her friends telling me what a selfish bee I am among other things. Best part? Kate was furious because she accidentally let slip at the hospital that 6 and 2 were home alone and CPS is now investigating her. I hope they take her kids away. If she treated her own sister like that, I fear what she would do to them. I finally blew up on my sister's Tesla boyfriend. I finally blew up on my sister's boyfriend after months of him constantly bragging about his Tesla. I met him a few months ago and it seemed like his entire personality was built around his car. I would say stuff like I have to stop at the gas station and he would say what's that I haven't heard about it in years or make stupid comments that would lead back to him owning a Tesla Model 3. I didn't mind it at first, but then it came to the point where he was always bringing it up in literally every conversation. The others around me were also pretty annoyed by him. I'm pretty successful in my career selling one of my businesses for around low 8 figures a year ago and started investing in low risk investments. I have been living a modest life, own a small 3BD house, starting another business in pest control, and a 2023 Civic Sport that I paid for in cash. One thing I absolutely can't stand is someone bragging or being flashy about money. Today, my brother and I were talking about buying a car and the dumb boyfriend came in and insisted on buying a Tesla because it's the future of cars. He was bragging about the entire thing and trying to convince my brother that even with the high price it's worth it. It didn't bother me until he said, "Don't end up like your brother buying a Honda Civic, they're trash." I blew up at that point telling him he didn't know what he's talking about. He only wanted to look rich or pretend to be rich because he has a Tesla while he's living at his parents' house. I then proceeded to tell him that I had enough money to buy 10 of his Teslas in cash and it's really not impressive but rather makes him seem like a moron trying to brag about owning a Tesla, and if you want to pretend to be rich you should back it up. Weird thing is my sister has made this thing out to be me bragging about my money and is entirely clueless that she's dating a lost cause. My family wants me to forgive and help my brother after he groped my wife. My family is willing to look past his crimes, but I am not. My fiancée and I first crossed paths nearly 7 years ago in college. Our mutual friends introduced us, and about a year later, our friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. When I introduced her to my family, they were thrilled, including my mother, who is typically reserved around outsiders. At this point, it's crucial to mention my brother. Before the incident, he was more than just a sibling to me, he was my role model. I admired his tenacity and protectiveness towards me and our sister. He always encouraged us to stand our ground and to never let anyone belittle us, reminding us we had every right to live here just like anyone else. When my girlfriend and he met, they quickly became friends. As time progressed, my girlfriend grew closer to my family, especially my siblings. Given her strong bond with my family, it was not unusual for her to spend time with other family members. She went shopping with my sister and mother, played billiards with my cousins and me, and was a regular at every family gathering. It was at one of these family functions that everything took a dramatic turn. Most of us at the party, including myself, had too much to drink, to the point where I fell asleep on the floor in my parenting room. After the party, my girlfriend seemed noticeably distressed. When I inquired about her unusual behavior, she confided in me, "I think your brother tried to kiss me." I was so taken aback by her revelation that the lingering effects of the alcohol instantly faded. I asked her to tell me everything that had happened. She told me that several of the guests had gone to the roof to drink, seeking to feel the wind or something akin to that. One by one, they all left until only she and my brother were left up there. They continued drinking for a while, and during their conversation, she noticed my brother intensely staring at her. Suddenly, he bent down trying to kiss her. However, she was quick enough to dodge it. The atmosphere became extremely uncomfortable after that, prompting her to leave. After she finished recounting the events, I drove her home. Later, I confronted my brother and asked him to clarify the whole situation. His account was essentially the same as hers, providing his perspective of the incident. He apologized, blaming his inappropriate actions on excessive alcohol consumption, remembering that conversation angers me to this day. At that moment, I had thought it was just a dialogue. I couldn't have predicted what was about to happen next. After the party, my brother and I had a strained relationship. We hardly ever spoke, and when we did, it was as polite and formal as strangers. The only other person who knew about this incident was my younger sister. My girlfriend had revealed the story to her when she asked why my brother and I had grown distant. We decided not to share this with the rest of the family, fearing it would cause further fractures in our relationships. A few months later, my family organized another party where a lot of people were invited. At this point, I had hoped that enough time had passed since the kissing incident and that this event might be stepped towards normality. However, things took a turn for the worse. At some point during the party, I couldn't find my girlfriend. I looked for her for a while, presuming that she might be with my sister. But, an unsettling thought led me to check the rooms upstairs. As I ascended the stairs, I heard strange noises coming from one of the rooms. Upon opening the door, I was met with a horrifying sight. My brother was forcibly pinning my girlfriend to the bed, his hand covering her mouth and attempting to go underneath her dress, while she was desperately resisting. In a fit of rage, I pounced on my brother, beating him mercilessly. My girlfriend managed to leave the room and went downstairs to seek help. When my father and uncles arrived, I was still on top of my brother, who was now bloodied and battered. My father had to forcibly separate us, but I continued to hurl insults at my brother, while still attempting to hit him. Once we were separated, my father asked me what had happened. It took me a while to form coherent sentences, but I finally revealed that I had caught my brother attempting to abuse my girlfriend. My father, in shock, sat on the floor in silence for about 10 minutes until my uncles called him to take my brother to the hospital. After my brother was taken away, I found my girlfriend talking to my sister, recounting the horrifying ordeal. We left the party immediately, and on our ride back home, my girlfriend was inconsolable. She was confused, angry, and the crying continued until she fell asleep. This was her routine for the next couple of days, crying until exhaustion forced her to sleep. During these days, my family kept me updated about my brother's condition. I had broken his nose and dislocated his jaw. My mother was in denial, unable to believe that her son was capable of such a horrific act. I understood that each person reacts differently to shocking news, but it did little to reduce the anger I felt. The last thing I heard about my brother was that he had lost his job and left town as a consequence of his actions. For the following weeks, I cut off almost all contact with the outside world and focused on helping my girlfriend. She was handling the situation as best she could, still frightened about the incident and drained of energy. Life was improving, or so I thought. Then I got an emergency call from my dad asking me to forgive my brother. I was pissed, more so at my dad than at my brother. Apparently he was going through some money problems and only I could afford to help him. I knew that arguing with them was useless, so I agreed to help. And when the time came for me to transfer some money, I sent him a penny. A single penny. My toxic roommate got used to ordering me around, so I left her without a notice. I used to live with my parents and my brother. When my dad passed away, my mom and my brother decided to move to another state. They left me a last-minute notice and they didn't offer or invite me to go with them. Having no other option, I had to look for my own place. I couldn't pay the rent all by myself and I only had a week left at my current place, so I asked my best friend to be my roommate. She was renting a room from an old lady who would knock on her door in the middle of the night to tell her to turn off the lights. In short, a landlord from hell. Without any hesitation she agreed and we got our apartment. I had to do the hunting, the cleaning, decorations and stocking food and house supplies. All she had to do was to move in. I felt like I owed her for saving me from being homeless, so I didn't even argue with her when she told me she wanted the bigger room. Almost twice as big as my room. Her only concern was the rent. She was previously paying $800 for her room for 3 years and she said it was affordable. I agreed that since the rent was $2,200, she will pay $1,000 and I will pay $1,200 even if I got the smaller room. So that it wouldn't be overwhelming for her. We also agreed to paying half and half for all the bills. We only have one dedicated parking spot and I even agreed to have her park over there while I park 3 blocks away. Not a week into this, she's already complaining about how low class the apartment looks like. I didn't say anything. Months go by and this keeps getting worse. She would never wash her dishes, never take out the trash, never cleans the house, but has the audacity to insult and complain about our apartment. She would always make fun of our place to our friends even when she didn't buy a single piece of furniture, never decorated nor cleaned. I don't like confrontation, so I kept my mouth shut. She also ended up not paying half for our bills because in her defense she is already paying for our cable and Wi-Fi, which is like $70 per month. I'm left with paying $320 per month for our utility bills. But this is where I said I'm done. She bought a brand new luxury car. She asked me if we could carpool since our work is literally across the street from each other. I didn't want to agree to that, so I told her I would think about it. I do a lot of stuff before going to work and I wouldn't want that time for myself to be taken away because I would have to be considerate of her schedule. The day after she brought that up, she told me that she left her car at her job because she didn't want to damage and add miles to it and that she'll just take it home every weekend. She automatically assumed that I'll take her to work. Me, not trying to be an asshole, drove her to work. Being a people pleaser, I couldn't say no and this became an everyday thing. Also, she told me that she would drive my car as being a passenger makes her sleepy. She drives my car so recklessly and would always insult my car. At first, I didn't say anything about it, but after having to pay for a bunch of repairs on it I told her to be more careful with my car the nicest way I could. I even brought up the fact that the car is very sentimental to me as my dad gifted it to me months before he died. It was the last thing and only thing my dad left me. Couple of days ago, she told me that we have to leave early because she has a nail appointment before we go to work. I told her to just bring her car home and she declined. I told her I have something to do with my girlfriend that morning and I can't go with her. She still declined and I just compromised like I always do. I didn't know that it was going to take hella long for her to be done. We came to work an hour late and I voiced to her that I would stay at work an hour later than usual to complete my hours. Later that night, she messaged me asking where I was, to which I replied I'm completing my 8 hours. And to which she replied, you do like making things harder for me. Just like before, I didn't say anything back. As we're driving home that night, I can sense that she was pissed. She was driving my car way more recklessly than usual and she intentionally drove over a huge pothole causing it to break my car's exhaust. She just laughed it off. This was my breaking point. I kept quiet, messaged some of my friends, gave them the key to my apartment and told them to help me haul my stuff while me and my roommate were at work. That same day, I quit my job and left early without letting her know about my plans. Blocked her number and moved in with my other friends. They told me they're happy I finally moved on from that toxic beach. My ignorant parents preferred my adopted brother over me, so 15 years later I abandoned them. I was 8 years old when for some reason my parents decided they wanted to adopt. The boy they adopted was 1 year younger than me but was very demanding and knew how to always get his way. He was a shrewd mastermind and began to isolate me from my own family. Let's call him Steven. Despite our family growing up poor, Steven always made demands to my parents and they met them. I would never get a gift on Christmas or Thanksgiving, but he would get his favorite new toy or a Game Boy. I used to get really frustrated and yell, why does he get gifts but I don't? And my parents would always reply the same way, Steven grew up in a rough environment so he deserves better. Steven knew this and took advantage of it. My favorite place was a local pizza place whereas his was McDonald's. And I don't know how but he always convinced my parents to take us to McDonald's. The final straw was on my 16th birthday. It had been years since I properly celebrated my birthday with my friends because I would be too embarrassed to show them our house. This year however my parents finally decided to splurge on me and planned a party for me. We were hosting at my favorite pizza place and all my friends from school were invited. Leading up to the party Steven was pouting a lot and throwing a lot of tantrums. I should have known those were signs and he would do something to mess up my day. Well, my birthday comes around and everything is going perfectly. That's until they bring out the cake. It is a chocolate cake. I hate chocolate but Steven loves it. When I asked what was going on, my parents replied Steven's birthday is just next month so we decided today can be a celebration for the both of you. He said he already talked to you about this and said you were happy to include him. I was so pissed and yelled at Steven, how dare you lie and ruin my day? Couldn't you have let me get just one day for myself? I was also embarrassed because this was in front of my friends. Steven acted all cute and innocent and replied, "But we talked about this and you agreed. Why are you yelling at me, dear brother?" We had definitely not talked about this or anything at all. My parents decided that I suddenly didn't deserve a party because of my attitude and kicked me out. Yup, they kicked me out of my own birthday party. I had to sit in the car and watch through the window as Steven cut the cake that was supposed to be for me. My friends tried to express their disapproval, but they were also kicked out. I decided then that I wouldn't stay with this toxic family a day more than I have to. I talked to my professor and he went a bit lenient on me in class so I could work hard on my job and save money. I saved up for 2 years. One of my friends had a relative that owned some real estate and was able to lend me a 1-bedroom apartment for cheap in a nearby city. I had also secured a scholarship for a college near my apartment. I was all set to move out the day I turned 18. Well, the big day comes around and I'm slightly nervous. I was worried that if they threw a big party for me and made it up to me I would forgive them. Guess what, they didn't even wish me a happy birthday. It was a holiday so I lazed around waiting for someone to remember what day it is. Eventually I just gave up and went to my room to finish packing. I wasn't taking too much with me so I had just 2 bags that I could easily carry. I gave a call to one of my friend's older brother to come pick me up and made my way downstairs. Everyone was shocked that I was going somewhere with filled bags. I simply told them that I'm moving out. They freaked out and yelled at me for not discussing this with them. I brought up the fact that they had forgotten my birthday, which was in fact today, and that I'm 18 now and can do whatever I want. They said to me in an annoyed voice, "We didn't forget anything. We will celebrate your birthday together with Steven next month. Now go back to your room. You're being grounded for a week." I was dumbfounded. I was turning 18 while Steven was turning 17. Mine was a major milestone in life, and yet they decided that they would give their attention to a son that wasn't even theirs biologically. I showed them the middle finger and told them that an adult can do whatever he wants to. They realized I was serious and my mother started crying. "How can you abandon your loving family? How can you do this to us?" she asked. I told her the truth, my family went away when I was 8. They are the ones that abandoned me. They had a new son named Steven and I was left in the trash can. After saying that I just ran out crying. They chased after me but the car was ready and I drove off before they could catch me. I blocked and deleted their numbers from my phone. They had no way to contact me and I was finally free. But that wasn't the end of it. The best part came 5 years later. My ignorant parents preferred my adopted brother over me, so 10 years later I abandoned them. They chased after me but the car was ready and I drove off before they could catch me. I blocked and deleted their numbers from my phone. They had no way to contact me and I was finally free. But that wasn't the end of it. The best part came 5 years later. I am still living in that cheap 1-bedroom apartment and doing well in college. I'm about to graduate top of my class and have several job opportunities lined up. One day I got a call from an unknown number. I decided to answer it and it was my mother. She was crying and wailing and said she's been searching for me all this time. She had got my number from the friend that helped me move. After 5 years I had kinda moved on so I was more sympathetic with her. We didn't talk much on the phone but agreed to meet in person. I refused to give them my address so we met at my favorite pizza place. I had to travel back in my car but I didn't want to alert them even to the name of my city. She brought my dad with her and they asked me how I was doing, etc. Seeing as the conversation is just going in circles I tell them that I'm waiting for their apology. They both looked at me with a blank look and say, "Apology? Apology for what?" Then they proceeded to explain how I am the one who should apologize for leaving their house without a notice. I didn't get angry then and just kept listening. My mom explained how Steven had asked for a car for his 20th birthday and they had bought it for him but now they were in debt. So they basically contacted me just to ask me for money they could spend it on that damn Steven again. Well, I had made a lot of contacts in college and there was this one guy that could print counterfeit currency in mass numbers. I told my parents I'll send them the money in cash and they hugged me and said that I was doing the right thing. They insinuated that this would be considered my apology and I just smiled in return. Next week I sent them thousands of dollars, except the notes were fake. I did this because I had a premonition about what they would do with this money. And I was right. They gave it all to Steven, who decided it would be a great idea to take that money to a casino. While my parents didn't suffer any consequences, the casino had Steven arrested and he was put in jail. I blocked my parents' number once again and am currently enjoying a spa weekend with my beautiful girlfriend. Jail versus spa, it's pure bliss. My ex-girlfriend came back after 10 years and called me a liar when she found out I had already moved on. Back when I was 14 years old, I fell in love with one of my classmates in school. She's kinda gullible in a cute way, and laughs so hard at my jokes even at her expense. I started courting her, and she was hesitant at first given that we were very close friends, but she told me she'd give me a chance since she loves being around me. After 3 to 4 months of courting, she then said yes, and we became officially boyfriend and girlfriend. We fell in love so hard and dated until we graduated high school. After the graduation, it was summer break, she told me she needs to live with her sister in the capital city to attend college. I told her that it would be okay for us, and that we could make a long-distance relationship work. I studied at one of the universities in our province, and she went with her sister to the city. We communicated a lot over the few months of us being away. I called her for our 4th anniversary, and told me that no matter what I should wait for her. But, then a few months later, she suddenly disappeared. I couldn't call her phone, her social media accounts became inactive. When I saw that she had a new account, just not one following me, I realized finally that she ghosted me. When I tried to reach out, I was ignored. This broke me. Suddenly, she became somebody that I used to know. A couple months into this breakup, one of her friends came to the same campus that I went to. I just politely said hello to her, and she asked me to go out at a cafe near our campus after classes. We met at the cafe, and told me that my ex said she was sorry, and gave me a letter she sent. The letter said that she can't make it work having a long-distance boyfriend, and she just wanted to move on, and wished me best. It freaking hurt. I thanked her friend, went to my boarding house, and cried ugly, but I decided to respect her decision, and moved on. A year passed, and I met a girl in a workshop. I attended. We had the same line of course, just at different schools. I asked for her number to schedule a study session. She was tomboyish, so at first I didn't really notice her in a romantic way. As we started hanging out more, I realized I really liked this girl. She started wearing fit clothes, and I noticed her face was really pretty when her hair was not ponytailed. After almost a year of hanging out, I courted her, and she excitedly said yes, saying that she liked me for the longest time. She just didn't want to initiate something because it was kind of frowned upon in our country. Now, we're both professionals, have a cute daughter, and have been married for 8 years. Suddenly, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my ex-girlfriend asking if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated but agreed, in one condition. I told her I had to bring my wife. She became furious on the phone, and called me a liar and manipulator. But she still insisted on meeting me without my wife, so I told her I would meet her in a public place. When we met, I started the conversation with "Hi, how have you been?" She told me she had a 4-year-old son, but got separated from her partner. She also told me that she went back to our province for me, and when she found out I was married with a family, she was shocked because I promised her that I'd wait for her. I was stunned with the audacity, as she stuttered, trying to control her crying. I stopped her, and told her while gritting my teeth, "Thank you for coming back for me. But, you can't just come back in my life after 10 years, after abandoning me, and having a son and other relationships." I told her to never contact me again. I stood up, thanked the staffs in the stall, eyes red from my emotions, and went to my wife and daughter in another restaurant. When I got home, I told my wife the story, and she hugged me. I am very thankful with everything I have right now. That ex may be my first love, but my wife is my greatest. I killed my grandma by listening to Yeet. I have to take my grandma to doctor's appointments every Friday. Her heart is all messed up, so they just do weekly check-ins with her. Driving her there is always so annoying. In her old age, she's become bitter and rude. My grandma often won't even let me listen to music while driving her. On the rare occasion she lets me turn on the radio, it has to be jazz. She's such a geezer. Last Friday, while we were listening to music on the way to her doctor's appointment, I went to turn up the volume, and she hit my hand away. I was so effing pissed. I do everything for her, and she has the balls to do that poop to me? So, I connected my phone to the car. She asked where the jazz music went, and I told her I wanted to show her a good jazz song I found. As she looked out the window, I turned up the volume on full blast. Then, I played Out the Way by Yeet. The car started shaking, and my grandma let out a scream. I was dying with laughter, and she was dying. Except she was actually dying. She started shaking, and her eyes rolled back in the back of her head. I turned down the music, and accelerated my car towards the doctor's office. When I arrived, I carried my grandma from the passenger seat to get her medical attention. I was waiting for hours, praying that my grandma was alive. When the doctors came out, they delivered the news. She suffered a severe heart attack. I asked if she was alive, and they all looked down. "Your grandma is dead." "I'm so sorry. I killed my own grandmother from listening to Yeet. Am I the a-hole?" My girlfriend ditched me and our daughter. 3 years later and she wants to meet up. My ex-girlfriend and I first got together 6 years ago, and from day one, we got on like 2 peas in a pod. Then after 2.5 years together she fell pregnant. We had spoken about kids before and we both wanted a family, but not after just 2 years together. We spoke about it a lot, asked a few of our friends that already have kids, and eventually decided to go for it. We also agreed that even if our relationship doesn't last, our child's well-being would always come first. Right before the lockdown in 2020, 3 weeks before the due date, we welcomed a perfect little girl and both of us were completely infatuated. It was a big adjustment, but our girl was an angel and we settled into parenthood rather quickly. Everything was going great at first, but 3 months later, it all changed. I was working late when I got a text from my mother to tell me my girlfriend dropped our daughter off with her while she ran some errands, but 4 hours later, she hadn't returned and now she wasn't answering her phone. I called too, but she didn't answer me either. I got out of work, collected my daughter and went home to find a note from my girlfriend. She said that she couldn't handle the stress of lockdown and the baby and she just needed some time to clear her head. She also said not to call in, that we would talk soon, but days turned to weeks with no contact from her or anyone else other than her sister, who visited her niece often but never mentioned my girlfriend. Fast forward 3 years and my ex-girlfriend is slowly starting to reach out again. It was slow at first, liking photos of our girl on Instagram and the odd comment, but that was it until last week. She sent me a text saying that she had seen how well our daughter and I are doing and asking if we could meet up. I was reluctant, but we agreed before our daughter was born that her well-being is what mattered the most, so reluctantly, I agreed to meet for a coffee so she can see our girl, but I'm having second thoughts. How do I forgive her for walking out on me and, more importantly, on our daughter? I called a woman a grandma when she couldn't stick to proper etiquette. A few years ago I went to the orchestra with my mom. We sat near the back row. Beside me on the right were 2 younger ladies and an older lady that was clearly with them. As the show starts, the girl beside me is on her phone texting and also taking some pictures/videos. I let it slide the first and second time, but then politely asked her to put her phone away. The ushers weren't able to see and intervene because we were in the last row. She puts it away, although she is clearly annoyed. I started enjoying the show again. A few moments later, She and the older lady switch places. 5 minutes after the swap, she proceeds to take her phone out and straight up start recording the show. At this point I'm just shocked at how inconsiderate and dumb these people are. I let her record a few minutes before I asked her to please put it away. She stops recording. We can all get back to the show we all equally paid for to enjoy. Well, that didn't last long. She started taking photos. This time I ask her right away to stop or I will get an usher over. She gets upset and starts trying to say something, but I cut her off and say maybe you should try and set a better example for your granddaughters. She was probably their mom or aunt. Well, let me tell you, she was too stunned to say anything else and stopped talking after that and also record anymore. It was too bad that now I had to sit there annoyed. Although I was pleased with myself after my ageist insult. She ended up rushing out of the show when it was done and didn't make eye contact. You want to insult my friends? I'll tank your grade. Few years ago, I was paired up with this girl in my class for an English presentation. I honestly can't remember what it was about. I didn't know her well at first, and she seemed kind of chill, so I invited her to my house to work on the project. When we took a break from working and talking about things outside of the project, she told me how I was pretty cool and chill once she got to know me. I felt the same way and almost considered becoming friends with her. But then she said that she assumed I wasn't this chill, because of the friends I had. When I asked what she meant, she asked me why I hung out with the people I did because they were kind of losers and suggested I should find better people. And that stung. To give you an idea, she was hanging more with the popular kids in the school and I kind of just existed everywhere. I wasn't popular but I wasn't really nerdy either, so I had different groups of friends. But my friends were really chill and good people and they were there for me a lot. After she said that, I didn't want her in my house. So I cut the project work short and said we can split the work and work individually. I just wanted her gone. Now this project was a fairly big chunk of our grade and because this was a partner assignment, we were told we were getting marked together for presenting, so I couldn't let her jeopardize my grade. I really tried to tolerate her. However, as it got closer to the due date and she wasn't making much progress on her work and I started picking up more of her work, I realized she was just using me to get a good grade. So I did 95% of the work by the end of the project but didn't send her the finished presentation until the morning before our class started. Now on to the real pettiness. The day of the presentation arrived and our professor said both partners will have to present, but we now had the option of choosing to get marked individually or together, as opposed to the previous only marked together option. Now because I had done 95% of the presentation, it also meant only I knew the majority of the content, and she didn't. So right before it was our turn to present, I went up to the professor and told her how I wanted to be marked separately from my partner because I did 95% of the work. My professor understood and agreed, but I didn't tell my partner this info, so she assumed that we would get marked the same. I equally divided the presentation with her, even on the part she had no idea how to explain, and we presented. And she fumbled so bad. Later that day we got our marks and I remember getting a 90% while seeing that she got something in the 60s range. I never told her my grade but she never talked to me again. I gleefully told people I had cancer after they dismissed me. The past week has been a roller coaster of emotions for me. My therapist had suggested that I write my thoughts and feelings in a journal, but I always convinced myself there wasn't enough time in a day. Writing that post made me realize I was dealing with many suppressed emotions. I resent the people who just took without getting back. I had told nobody besides my therapist about how much I felt like a ghost of a person and how I pushed things down and never complained. So, I spent hours writing down my thoughts in a diary. I realized I needed to be more honest and stop tiptoeing around people to make them comfortable. I told my husband that I knew about his past with his ex-girlfriend. I knew they had unresolved feelings, and he needed closure about her and their relationship. He kept checking her social media, which intensified after her car accident this year. He was shocked that I knew. I encouraged him to reach out and get the closure he wanted. We had a good conversation. He hugged me and reached out to her immediately. I think he was waiting for that push from someone. He was so happy after the conversations they had, he was glowing. She's coming to our city in a month, and they'll meet in person. He's been more affectionate and genuinely lighter, like there's a weight off his chest. I went through the motions of life. I started ignoring calls from my parents. I didn't want to help out anymore. I was too tired. My mom called and said I was being arrogant and moving away from my family before asking me to help with something. I didn't reach out to my friends. I have only a few, and we would text every day. I realized we texted because I always reached out. I told someone else about my diagnosis. My neighbor Nancy is a woman in her late 70s. She's one of the few people I feel seen by. She cares about me and if I had told her about my health issues, she would have told me too. Go to the ER. I know why I didn't tell her but I wonder why I hope for care from people who have demonstrated no respect for me instead of those who do. She was so worried for me. We had planned a fun day trip to see a flower festival next spring. I drove home on my first week of the second cycle, and for the first time, I was exhausted. I had to pull over and rest for an hour before I felt well enough to finish driving home. I was so exhausted I didn't want to move. But I moved and sat in my driveway. It hit me then that I didn't have NSLSC stage 2A. I had lung cancer. I could die. I just started sobbing. All I could think of was the stupid flower festival. I haven't lived my life. I love my husband, my family, and my friends. But I don't want to marry him, I don't want to cater to my family, and I'm tired of my friends. I want to live. I want to be well enough to drive and see the flower festival with Nancy. It's only been a week and a half of change, and my emotions have gone from low to really high and back to low. I've been dreaming of my life after I beat cancer and left my husband and friends. I don't know if I can stick with it, but I am determined to be strong. My therapist says change within can start small or big. She's proud of me and thinks I can get through this. I gleefully told people I had cancer after they dismissed me. I have always been a filler person. My parents each had a child they obviously favored. My mother favors my younger sister, my father and my younger brother. I am the friend that is ignored in a group. I am the employee whose birthday is forgotten. I'm the person who doesn't get dates. I've gotten used to it. As a result of being this agreeable, filler, dull person, I think the people around me don't realize that I'm a natural person with needs like everyone else. The prime example was when I said my chest hurt and I coughed constantly. The people I spoke to, and I know only a few, said it was not a big deal and that I'd be fine. I'd never complained before, so I should be fine. I took that to heart and wondered if I really should have told people I didn't feel well and if I was making it up in my head. It took me a long time to tell the doctor my symptoms because I thought I was overreacting, but I had to get checked out. Well, it turns out that there was something wrong with me. I have stage 2 NSCLC. Lung cancer. I'm still independent and handling this alone. I drive myself to and from appointments, pick up my medication, and reason with doctors and insurance. I haven't slacked on housework or at work. In fact, I've worked even harder. Today at work, I told my friend I'd help her move as a favor because I had a medical appointment that day. She pressed me for more details, and I just said I had NSCLC treatment. I didn't want to give more information than that. My husband complained that I told her the info gleefully as if I was happy about the news. I told him I'm so glad to be diagnosed because it proves I have human needs like everyone else. I wasn't crazy. He said I shouldn't act like this. My husband has been unstable and touchy about random things this year, so I don't know if he has a point. Ada? Edit. Same day. I'm in therapy. My therapist and I are working through things, and she's been accommodating. I feel somewhere between a filler person and an automation. Filler people aren't real. They don't have life complexities and exist solely to make others shine. Machines don't get sick. The diagnosis was concrete. I'm a person, I'm not crazy and it's not in my head. I don't want attention from others. I cried and felt relief at the exact moment. I know why my husband has been unstable and touchy, thanks to the comments. At the beginning of this year, his love got into a car accident and broke her femur. She survived and is healthy now. I think that could be part of what's concerning him. My illness is a reminder that she could have died, and she could still die, and life is unpredictable that way. I alone wouldn't inspire such emotion in my husband. The comments made me realize that my husband likely felt helpless at death. I traced back to when he became touchy and moody and realized it was when she got into that car accident. My husband has asked for help. But there's nothing for him to do. I have taken care of everything and will continue to do so. People of Reddit, how did you manage a career transition? I wanted to share a personal story that I believe could be helpful to others who might be facing a career change or uncertainty about their professional path. A little over a year ago, I found myself at a crossroads in my career. I had been working in the same industry for nearly a decade, and while I was financially stable, I felt unfulfilled and increasingly unhappy with my job. I was constantly questioning my choices and wondering if I could do something more meaningful with my life. I decided it was time to make a change, but I had no idea where to start. That's when I turned to Reddit for advice. I began searching for subreddits related to career change, job hunting, and personal development. I found a lot of information and a supportive community of people who had gone through similar experiences. I posted about my situation, explaining my background and the industries I was interested in exploring. The response I received was overwhelming. Redditors shared their own stories, provided tips on updating my resume and LinkedIn profile, and even suggested books and online courses to help me gain new skills. One piece of advice that stood out was to attend networking events and industry-specific meetups. I found a local Reddit community that organized regular meetups, which turned out to be invaluable for making new connections and learning more about fields I was interested in. After months of networking, applying for jobs, and refining my skills, I finally landed a position in a completely different industry. It's been a challenging transition, but I can honestly say that I've never been happier with my career. I feel more fulfilled and motivated every day, and it's all thanks to the support and advice I received from the Reddit community. I wanted to share this story to highlight the power of online communities like Reddit. The willingness of strangers to offer their insights and encouragement can make a profound difference in your life. If you're feeling stuck in your career or contemplating a change, I encourage you to reach out to the Reddit community and tap into the collective wisdom and support that's available here. My addiction almost unalived me. I wanted to share a personal story about my battle with addiction and how making a pivotal decision changed my life for the better. I hope my experience can provide some inspiration and hope to others who may be going through a similar struggle. A few years ago, I was caught in the grips of a severe addiction to various substances. It all began with a prescription for pain relief after a major surgery, but it quickly spiraled out of control. I was using more and more, and it was ruining my life. I lost my job, strained relationships with friends and family, and felt like I was in a never-ending cycle of despair. I knew I needed help when I almost overdosed, but the thought of reaching out for it was daunting. I was ashamed of my situation and was afraid of judgment. But one day, after hitting rock bottom, I decided I couldn't continue down this destructive path. I mustered the courage to confide in a close friend, who helped me find a local addiction support group. The people there were incredibly supportive, non-judgmental, and genuinely caring. They shared their own experiences, offered guidance, and encouraged me to seek professional help as well. I entered a rehabilitation program, which was one of the toughest things I've ever done. The detox process was grueling, and the emotional struggles were intense, but I persevered. The support of the rehab staff and fellow patients was invaluable. After completing the program, I continued attending the support group and also sought therapy to address the underlying issues that had contributed to my addiction. Slowly but surely, my life began to improve. I mended relationships, found a new job, and most importantly, learned healthier ways to cope with life's challenges. It's been a long journey, and there have been setbacks along the way, but I'm proud to say that I'm now several years clean and leading a fulfilling life. My experience taught me that it's never too late to seek help and make a change, and that there are compassionate people out there willing to support you. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please don't hesitate to reach out. There is hope, and there are resources available to help you take that first step toward recovery. Remember, you're not alone in this fight. Neighbor blows air horn at dog and my brother has the sudden desire to practice his guitar on the back porch. So I've lived in this house for 2 years with my brother. The neighbors work nights and have woken us up every morning they have work. See, their driveway is 5 feet from our bedrooms. They like to take Bluetooth phone calls in their cars when they get home. I can hear these calls on the opposite side of my house. Let alone 5 feet away through my bedroom wall. When I got my dog and she started deterring the phone calls by barking at them when she was outside, I kind of thought it was funny. Until the neighbor guy started blowing an air horn at her. The first time I took it as a sign that I was being a bad owner and installed dog bark deterrents outside. Thing is, this guy leaves his house to do yard work once a week and gets the mail once a day. I bring her inside whenever I see him outside, but sometimes I don't catch her in time. The dog bark deterrent battery died earlier today too. So I'm relaxing in my living room and here comes the air horn. My brother got sick of it and felt a sudden compulsion to set up his guitar and amp on the back porch. 15 minutes into his impromptu concert, I hear yelling. I go outside and the neighbor is screaming at my brother that he's an asshole and he already spoke to me, which is a lie, and said that if he's outside then bring the dog inside. He, wife, who had been hovering by the door, stormed inside. My brother is considering practicing every afternoon when he comes home from work. Am I the a-hole for refusing to bend over for my stepsister? Okay, so I feel like a monster, but I also feel like I need to stand my ground here, but I don't want to be a mega asshole. I have a stepsister Jane who I have known for 7 years. We've had our ups and downs, but ultimately she's family and I would never want to intentionally hurt her. One thing she does a lot during arguments with her mom is say, well, dad would let me do X or maybe I'll go stay with dad then. I never met her dad. I've seen him a few times but I was never properly introduced to him. Him and Lucy, my stepmom, had a bad breakup and she didn't want him to meet my mom or me, which I can understand given what she's told me about him. For the past week, Jane had been even more irritable than usual. I tried talking to her but she shut me out. Lucy and mom told me she'd come around and not to pry. I found out a few days ago that she had been using my expensive skincare and had almost emptied a bottle that takes me 5 months to finish, in a week. As well as using all my other skincare stuff. I was pissed and confronted her, telling her to replace it. She started crying and getting angry at me. She said I was being an annoying cunt for chasing her up on face wash and that I need to leave her alone. I will admit, we both said harmful things which I regret, and I ended up saying, why don't you go live with your dad since he'll let you off. Jane's face dropped and she said, my dad died last week, you cunt. She ran and locked herself in her room after she said that, and I immediately regretted what I said. Shortly after, Lucy and mom came home and I explained what had happened. They both said I needed to apologize, which I agreed with. Lucy went to talk to Jane and afterwards told me Jane would only forgive me if I was grounded until the new year and she had free range of my wardrobe. I said no to both. I didn't bring up her dad as a gotcha he's dead moment, as I didn't know he had passed. Obviously, if I had known, I wouldn't have said anything about it and would have treated her outbursts differently because I know now she was grieving. Lucy and mum then said if I won't do those things, I should at least drive her around to her friends, university, etc. I again said no. We both go to different universities and the logistics won't work. Lucy said if I can't make it up to Jane, I shouldn't expect her to forgive me. I said I don't need Jane's sisterhood if it's only based on transactional things like car rides or clothes. Jane is fuming with me and Lucy and mum think I'm being petty and difficult for not even attempting to patch things up with Jane. I don't expect her to forgive me straight away, as that's not how humans work, but no apology would suffice as she doesn't want an apology, she wants my things. So as it stands, it's 3 against 1. And everyone at home thinks I'm a huge a-hole. Entitled Bully Eats Dirt on Paintball Day. Back about a decade ago I was working 2 jobs. A weekday one where I was making doors and windows and a weekend one where I was a paintball referee. At my week job, most of us were in our 20s. Me and this other guy, let's call him M, were the youngest. Both at 21 and 23. I've always been small. Still today I'm like 5 to 10. M was at least 6 to 1 and big too. He trained and worked out and was probably a bully in high school. He always made fun of everyone, not really bullying but still enough to be unpleasant to work with, even though he was good at his job. So one day another coworker comes to me and he's like, hey Op, that Saturday, we're planning to go play paintball at your work location. Think you can take a day off and play with us? I'm like, nah, the schedule is already out and I work, but you know what? Call back and ask for me as your referee, I'll make you all have an incredible time. Day comes and they're in my group to manage. I took a few more shots than usual, which I know that all the guys from the week job must have at least shot me on purpose at least once for shits and giggles. I still had an awesome day. Then came the end of the route. At our location, we had an enormous terrain where all groups spend the rest of the day at until they're out of munition and go to the base camp. So before going there I start talking to my group how I loved my day with them and I want to give them a little treat by shooting me with a squad execution, which consists of me standing alone and they all shoot me 1 round at once, making me take 40 to 50 rounds when there's 40 to 50 players. It's a lot of adrenaline. I then saw M's eyes glowing, grinning at the thought of shooting maybe 2 to 3 instead of only 1, and I called him out pointing at him. Except you, I'm challenging you. You're not man enough to join me. Cue a silence. I know he's starting to poop his pants. And know what? I'm even gonna remove my bullet vest. I then remove my protective vest, leaving me with just usual paintball clothes. The vest really does protect a lot since you feel a tap instead of a hurting snap with it. I could see the dread on his face, knowing all of our colleagues are now looking at his inflated ego being challenged. He couldn't refuse. Yee. Yeah. If you can do it, I sure can. His famous last words, we go outside, I explain how it works. The red team shoots me, the blue team shoots him. Experience comes into play and I place one arm around my neck while the other hand in front of my junk and starts counting. 3, 2, 1. Go. The moment lasted a few seconds at most. I shook it off. It's not my first time doing it. I started paying off some paint. I turn around and see him rolling on the floor, moaning in pain. I go to him and offer my hand to help him get up and say out loud so he and everyone hears, look at that, buddy, we made a man out of you. We finished the day, all was good. Everyone from the job patted me on the back saying he got what was coming to him and it was hilarious. Came Monday, he went to me saying how it was hilarious and he truly underestimated me, big smile on his face. He stopped being an as after that. My wife refused to sleep with me, so I took matters into my own hands. My wife has slept with me a total of 4 times in the last 6 months, and for the most part it is boring and lackluster. Sometimes I fantasize about just putting her in her place for the pain she caused me, however I do wish she would give me enthusiasm again. She's let herself go, and I'm pretty sure is having an affair with her co-worker, although I have never been able to prove that one. My reason for thinking this is because she came home from work one day with a huge smile on her face and I became suspicious, so I decided I would check her phone to see if she had been cheating on me. I waited until she was in the shower, and went into her purse, only to find a little packet called Tabs chocolates. I read the packet and it said these were SX chocolates used to increase drive between couples. The packet was open, so I knew she had been using these with somebody else. Fast forward to later that evening, I decided I wanted some action since my wife had no problem handing it out. I started to kiss her but she pushed me off and told me she was too tired. This infuriated me. After everything I did for this woman, she can't even give me some action. I decided I would make her feel special. I brought her a cup of hot chocolate and told her how grateful I am for her. She was very happy and drank it very enthusiastically. Little did know that hot chocolate had one of her SX chocolates melted into it. About 15 minutes later, she started telling me about how much I meant to her. It was working. We kissed and got into the action. Honestly, it had been so long since I saw her body, and she'd put on so much weight. I felt sick to my stomach. I wasn't even in the mood anymore, so I told her I'd be right back. I went and took one of those chocolates myself. The second I returned to that room, it was like I was looking at a Victoria's Secret model on my bed. I dived right in, to say the least. We had a wild night and she loved it. We've never felt this connected to one another. It was a shame it all had to end. As I told her it would be her last time sleeping with me, as I want a divorce. She broke down crying and begged me to stay with her. I told her, only if you can get me more of those chocolates, they're banging. Harassing principal gets her reputation absolutely ruined. So I taught elementary school for over 20 years.
Post-Cov D, I decided to pivot to something else because of conditions and this principal.
Anyway, she was hired as principal at a site that I was at for the majority of my time teaching. We had a long-term principal who had left a few years past and had a few years of a drunk racist principal that I helped get rid of, and then an interim principal who would fall asleep during IEPs. Not great. We can only go up from here, right? Wrong. There was automatic talk about the new principal being a little too friendly with the sports for kids guy. I just wanted to teach. After all the drama with drunk racist, I just wanted to keep my head down. Then, I started noticing that yes, they were extremely flirty with one another. He was driving around her new Mercedes. They would drink out of the same straw. He was always in her office behind her desk. It just didn't look good. She's in a position of power and married, and he's walking around campus like he's in charge of everything. But I don't get involved with other people's business unless it affects the children at school. Then someone called HR. Turns out they were banging all over school. Even when kids were on campus. All of the staff was interviewed by HR but no action was taken. From my vantage point, she may have been written up. I don't know. From that point on, she had her sights set on me because she believed that I had called HR on her. I found this out because she started interviewing all the classified staff, telling them that she had heard that they had been gossiping with a teacher about the affair. The attendance clerk had the presence of mind to ask which teacher. She told him it was me. The clerk and I had a friendly relationship, but he didn't ever get involved with gossip or anything. He asked me directly if I had said that he had told me anything. I was shocked and angry. She is overstepping her authority by interviewing a subordinate without representation. She's also lying about me to a workmate and calling my integrity into question. I sent her an email directly asking her what she was doing because I didn't call HR. I'm a union person and would have gone through the grievance process. No response from her end. So I just avoid her and am going forward. They actively harass me. Or rather, he does. He throws balls at me. He makes little snide remarks in my direction. I try telling him to leave me alone. I tell her that I want to be left alone. Harassment continues. Then we have a big staff meeting on the general mood of the staff. Principal gives her lover the floor and he starts verbally attacking a teacher using her name and humiliating her in front of all the staff about perceived slights he endured from her. You're not supposed to use people's names and a few of us call this out. Principal does nothing and allows him to continue to berate her for a few more minutes until it becomes unbearable for her and she leaves the room. Myself and a few others follow to check on her. She is shaking. We settle her down and talk for a while, trying to think up next steps. 2 days later, all of us who left the meeting were reported to HR by Loverboy. We have no idea of the charges against us and we have to wait weeks until we meet with HR and find out. All the charges are found to be untrue. She continued to harass me behind the scenes, going so far as to tell me I was going to get sued if I told anybody. I was hospitalized with COVID, even though we're distance learning and not in direct contact. After a distance learning year, I left the school for another district and my mental health. She told my new principal I was a troublemaker, so the new one didn't like me. I had had enough and decided to leave teaching. I felt defeated and worn out. Then, I learned that the old principal had been allowed to resign after a HR complaint from a parent against her for stealing PTA money. Of course, she then got a new job as a VP at the high school in the district I had just finished out my career in. Now for my petty revenge. I told the union president about her and what she had done in the neighboring district as well as a lot of the high school teachers who would be working under her. I work in this town, which despite its relative size and proximity to several large cities, still is remarkably small. Meaning everybody knows everybody and word gets around. It always gives me a small thrill to hear someone I come across who tells me in a hushed voice, "Do you know about the VP at the high school? She apparently had adult relations on the campus of her old school and stole money from the PTA? Oh, is that right? Wow. My husband called me a beach and now I can't tell if I'm resentful or not. My husband and I have a 3-week-old newborn. My milk supply has been low so I've been pumping every 2 to 3 hours. The arrangement my husband and I agreed to was that he and I would both wake up for the first feeding/pump session, where he would go feed the baby a bottle and I would focus on pumping. The issue is that my husband has insomnia and can't fall asleep easily. To mitigate this, I'll wear sleep headphones and will listen for the baby's cries when he's hungry. My husband's request is for me to wake him up when this occurs, so that he can help and I can focus on pumping. However, when I gently wake up my husband at the time that he asks me to, it's like a knee-jerk reaction for him to be angry. He'll jerk, complain loudly that he just fell asleep minutes ago, slap the bed with his fist or open hand in anger, then stomp off to tend to the baby. After which, he'll cool off, start singing and put on his cute voice with the baby and otherwise be okay. Meanwhile I'm left feeling horrible, feeling guilty for waking him up to the point where I don't want to wake him up because I'd rather just take care of everything myself than deal with him being pissy. Last night, I told him how these outbursts make me feel. That I'm afraid to wake him up because of them. His response was that this reaction is a reflex, no different to how a knee pops when struck with a hammer, and that I need to just accept that this response is an inevitability. Well, it's 2 a.m. now. I wake him up, he does his same angry song and dance and I go to pump. After he gets over his burst he comes out being positive and happy, trying to lightly joke about how this really pissed me off and that I really couldn't get over it. Admittedly, I tell him passive-aggressively that I'm over it, but maintain a shortness with him. He gets angry again, stating that of course between the two of us he's the one who can't sleep but I'm the one who's entitled to wear the angry beach face. He takes the baby to the bedroom and slams the door. After he's done feeding the baby, I tell him that I'm going to sleep outside for the night and he asks me again to wake him up when the baby wakes up. He adds, verbatim, "Can you just ignore my being mad for the first 15 seconds after you wake me up? I've done a good job here, and I feel like I'm owed that. I need you to be a big girl." I feel resentful of the fact that the burden is on me to get over his outbursts. However, I do also recognize that his bursts are short-lived, and that he is waking up to help me during an otherwise difficult time where both of us aren't getting sleep. He does a great job of supporting us and my emotional well-being during the rest of the day, so I may be the asshole for harboring this resentment. I need some outside perspective on whether he has a point and if I should extend his owed grace for this issue. My perfect boyfriend's brother changed him into a toxic alpha male. Me and my boyfriend have been dating for 4 years, we started dating in 7th grade and now we are both in our junior year of high school, and we are still madly in love. Ever since I knew him, he has always been the same funny, kind and morally obligated person. He would always do volunteer work, and was the president of our class every single year since the start of high school. We have plans to go to the same college together and we've already talked about marriage, and how many kids we want. He always scored the top of our class in grades, when he's not studying he's at church, and one of the most upstanding qualities he has is that he is waiting till marriage. Because of that, we usually have sleepovers at his place and I always feel very comfortable and safe with him. One thing to note is that my boyfriend doesn't have a father. He would usually look up to other people to get his influence and to build his character. Recently, his scumbag older brother just got out of juvie. Now, he is asking my boyfriend if he can stay with him. He told me about the situation and I was highly against it because I knew that his older brother was not a good influence. He was especially vulnerable to influence from older guys, due to his lack of a father figure. But my boyfriend was too kind and decided he wanted to help his brother. However, neither of us knew that this was one of the biggest mistakes of our life. The changes happened very slowly. I barely noticed them until one day in class he made a really peculiar joke about women. Usually he makes the whole class laugh but this time only his buddies from the sports teams laughed. He said in a really condescending tone, "Women," and he chuckled a bit. I wasn't sure whether or not to confront him about this, but in the end I decided to just let it slide. But that's when the second incident happened. I caught him through one of his house windows smoking and drinking alcohol with his older brother when I wanted to surprise him at his house. This was getting scary. I knew my boyfriend would originally never do things like that and yet as clear as day he was smoking and drinking. I went and knocked on the door and asked my boyfriend, who was very clearly intoxicated, if he wanted to go on a walk like we usually do. His brother responded for him and said walks are for PCs. My boyfriend said with a slurred speech, yeah, walks are faux putties. I never heard him use any profanity before, so I tried grabbing his hand to talk to him outside. But he slapped my hand off and said, don't touch the beach. His brother just started laughing, while I on the other hand ran out crying. I didn't know who this was. I started avoiding him for 2 days, despite the fact that he was blowing up my phone with apologies, and even at school he tried desperately to talk to me. Finally, I gave in and decided to listen to his part of the story. He was saying how it was all his brother's fault and that he deserved a second chance. I agreed, and over the next week his act started to pick up. I started to wonder whether his brother was finally gone, or arrested again. He wanted to make it up to me by having one of our traditional sleepovers together. I wasn't opposed as we would do this very regularly, but something about this time felt different. I saw that his brother's car wasn't in the garage, which was a good sign. Towards late at night when we were both lying in bed just chatting, he said he had to go to the bathroom. And I knew it was wrong, but I decided to go through his phone. I clicked on the chat between him and his brother, and I was horrified at what I saw. His brother's most recent message was, have you done it yet? To which he replied, not yet, but when she falls asleep it's game over. I heard his footsteps and just threw his phone down. I laid there completely frozen, looking at his fake smile. That's when I decided I had enough. I confronted him about everything that's happened, and he told me that he was just trying out new things and living his life. He then confessed to me that he didn't want to wait till marriage anymore and that he and were going to do it now. I obviously refused, but then he pulled down his pants and said, you know you want this. That's when I kicked him in the nuts and ran off. He didn't even bother chasing after me. The following days at school were awful. My ex kept on saying those sexist jokes in class, and it was really awkward because a lot of the people, especially the girls that used to like him, just resented him. I decided to get my revenge. This all started with his delinquent brother, so I knew he had to go. I created a plan and it worked out. His older brother was busted for his underage alcohol usage, and they found some coke as well, bonus. So now my ex was all alone and he had no one, not me nor his pathetic brother. Perfect revenge on Marge and Clara. Here goes another round with Clara, my dad's annoying and childish girlfriend. If you haven't read any of the previous pettiness, you need to know that Clara was quite a case. She tried in a childish manner to keep me and my sisters away from dad. You also need to know that dad was a good man, but he had some issues about being alone, so he sometimes was too passive about Clara's BS. So, here goes. Clara managed to establish a very good relationship with one of my aunts, dad's sister, based on the mutual hate they had for my mom. Let's call her Aunt Marge. One day, Marge went visiting dad, and I saw her in the yard. She came to me and started chatting. One of the topics of that conversation was my dad's upcoming birthday, and Marge asked me about what I would get for my dad. I've always been good at picking gifts for people, based on their needs and hobbies. Some time ago, I found a beautiful foldable pocket knife. Dad loved seafood, and he would love to have something like that to open shells, and told Marge about it, and where I saw it. My bad. 3 days before his birthday, Dad showed me the birthday gift Clara gave him in advance because she couldn't wait. A beautiful foldable pocket knife. The exact same one I told Marge about. I said nothing to him. He looked happy with his gift. I tried to think about a way to pull a revenge against Marge and Clara, but couldn't think of anything good. Revenge would have to wait another year to give me the opportunity. So near Dad's next BD, Marge tried to pull the same trick on me. So I told her I would get Dad some very expensive trekking shoes for his trips, and I saw the perfect ones in X store. The trick? I loved trekking shoes. Dad hated trekking shoes because he said they were too damn hot and made his feet sweat too much. We had the same foot size. So I went to a shoe store and bought me some of the shoes Dad really liked. Some nice sports shoes, at a very nice price. So Dad received from Clara his expensive shoes. And he hated them, but told nothing to Clara. So Clara gave me a smug look thinking she won again. Some days later, I showed my new shoes to Dad and he really loved them, and told me he wasn't going to use the ones Clara gave him. So I offered to trade his shoes for mine, since they both were new, and it would be a shame to waste a gift like that. So I got some really nice and expensive trekking shoes, and enjoyed listening to Clara yell at Marge on the phone after she knew Dad hated her trekking shoes and gave them to me. Break my heart? I'll get with your best friend. So back when I was in high school, I was dating who I thought was the love of my life. Looking back now, he was actually one walking red flag and our relationship was pretty damn toxic. But you live and you learn. I was 15 to 16 at the time. Well, he manipulated me into breaking up with him. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. I'd have to give background on many fights to truly explain how, but that'd make this way too long. He even admitted after that he was done with the relationship, but didn't want to be the one to end things. I also found out after the relationship ended that he cheated on me a few times. A weekish after we broke up, I saw a freestyle from Nicki Minaj, where she essentially said if a man breaks your heart, get with his best friend. Well, it just so happened that my ex would always complain to me about how he felt like his best friend was into me. While it wasn't entirely true, it also wasn't false, I've since learned. So I started texting my best friend. We were friends during mine and my ex's relationship, and had connections outside of the relationship. We got really close, and I don't even have the words to describe it. I just knew he was going to be so important to my life. We didn't end up dating back then, but we flirted on and off for a few years. When I went to college, I told everyone about the boy back home that I knew I was going to marry one day. At the time, he was my best friend. We both talked to other people, but nothing ever lasted. Well, fast forward to today, we live together and have been dating for a few years. There's a ring in the closet. We've both decided we're not at a point in our lives where we want to get engaged/married quite yet, but will one day. The story of when he bought the ring is quite romantic in my opinion. We just recently went on our first international trip together, and I saw a ring in one of the local shops that I absolutely fell in love with. He snuck down and bought it while I was asleep. It still bothers my ex. They still have some mutual friends, and they all wanted to hang out recently. My now boyfriend apologized to my ex and basically said, I messed up back then and went behind your back and that wasn't okay. But we now live together and are in a happy relationship. My ex told him to stick it where the sun doesn't shine. This isn't my proudest story, I don't generally enjoy hurting people. But he truly was a shitty-ass boyfriend. I'm scared to tell my brother about my sister's creep boyfriend. When I told him, he was crying really hard. We decided to put a pause in the conversation so that he would do something he regrets. I was a bit upset when she came home last night and after some pushing she told me what was up and it kind of broke my heart. This is obviously a bit weird for me to type out, I don't really want to imagine it. She said that her and Creep had been drinking a bit the previous night, she had a fair bit and was rather drunk. He ended up convincing her to try some more stuff. She said that they were making out and undressing but it ended up pretty much and still dressed in her knot. Which I don't know is slightly weird to me. He convinced her to try oral and was rather rough, holding her head down and such. Being rough with squeezing stuff etc. She told him to be gentler and he did for a bit but then would go back to rough. She said that once it was done she started putting her clothes back on but he wanted her to stay bare whilst they watched TV even though he was clothed. Which she did for a bit despite feeling uncomfortable. He had worked today so they didn't stay up late and she ended up coming back here instead of sleeping over at his house. She feels sort of dirty and used. I tried explaining to her that it shouldn't be like that. It should be enjoyable for both parties. She seems to think her experience was just down to it being the first time and that she will get used to it. This is clearly a major red flag but she doesn't seem to think so. Blinded by young love I guess. Haven't told my brother or girlfriend about this. As far as this is aware they don't even know about the creep. Not sure if I should tell them or not. On one hand it might help them formulate a better argument when they do speak to her on Saturday but on the other hand I don't think my brother would take that particularly well. Saturday evening me and my sister came over to theirs too. Have dinner. I was pretty nervous about how it was going to go but I think after reading all your comments I was pretty prepared for it. Once we got settled, the girlfriend asked my sister if she could talk to her for a minute. The girlfriend talks to her about intimacy, how it should be, safety, relationships, that sort of thing. I wasn't there for it as I thought my sister would be more inclined to be open if there wasn't a blood relative sitting there staring. Girlfriend came out and got my brother and he went in there for a bit. Once I was just me outside I eavesdropped a bit and heard a lot of tears. It seemed my sister was already aware how it was a weird relationship and wasn't entirely happy but was too embarrassed to admit that the first time I saw her was when I was a boyfriend she'd managed to get and bragged about it turned out to be so horrible. At this point I went and saw my sister crying in my brother's arms. She couldn't seem to stop. I'm guessing all the stuff she was bottling up about this whole ordeal was finally coming out now she had someone to speak to. My brother also looked like he was crying a little. Turns out what my sister had told me about their previous encounter wasn't completely accurate. Whilst it was true it was just oral. Supposedly he had been much rougher than she told me and called her nasty names but she's adamant it wasn't rope. My brother looked really uncomfortable as she was talking about it which I can't really blame him for. It must be absolutely horrible hearing your little sister speak about experiencing that. By this point it was obvious he was crying but my sister couldn't see as she still had her face buried on his chest. His girlfriend looked pretty sad too. My brother was rubbing her back and telling her it's okay and that he wants her to feel free to talk to him anytime about anything. His girlfriend still thinks he's beating himself up about his perceived failings and I can't imagine the new news is going to do him many favors in his head. At this point sister seemed to be aware of his tears and sat up and they hugged for what felt like ages. I reassured my sister that everyone comes across bad boyfriends at some point in their life and it's nothing to be ashamed about. We talked a bit more. She said she was glad she could end it with a weirdo without feeling embarrassed and never wants to see him again. She said she wishes she could just forget the whole ordeal. She admitted to girlfriend in their earlier discussion that it wasn't like an age fetish thing, he just made her feel special for once, which I've read as a common tactic of these creeps. We talked a bit more but since it was Saturday I can't remember any more specifics than I've already mentioned. After we were done chatting I went out onto the balcony to smoke and when I came back brother and sister were on the sofa watching a film and girlfriend was cooking. She was curled up with her head on his chest and appeared to be happy. I'm hoping she was feeling the feeling I had the other week of being loved like we were children again. At one point she texted the creep that she didn't want to see him again etc. At first he started texting almost begging but then it turned to quiet nasty words and threats. He started calling and calling. Eventually my brother answered and stepped onto the balcony with her phone. I don't know what was said but I heard some shouting and I can't imagine he was very friendly. I'm scared to tell my brother about my sister's creep boyfriend. I think he might flip on the 40-year-old creep. We grew up without a father and our mother is very sick/struggles with drug issues. My older brother, 25, practically raised me, 19, and my sister, just turned 18. We still live in my mother's house however she may as well not even be there. My brother lives with his girlfriend on the other side of town. Well, here is the issue we have. My sister recently brought an older guy over to our house to watch a movie. He's around 40 years old. I mean he seems nice enough on the surface but the age gap and the fact she only recently turned 18 really rubbed me the wrong way. Not even sure how he could bring himself to go into an 18-year-old's house. I've spoken to her about it and she said they hadn't done anything intimate except kiss and she said she isn't in any rush to. She reckons he loves her, yeah right lol, and she loves him. She's never gone past kissing before and is much more innocent than I was as a teen. My sister hasn't had a boyfriend before, and whilst she isn't stupid, I feel she is easily manipulated due to her personality and naiveness. I went over to my brother's house the day after whilst he was at work and spoke to his girlfriend, 25, about it. She seemed disgusted by the whole thing but also concerned about my brother. While she agreed it had to be done, she said it was important it's done properly. She agreed not to do it without me. Bit of info about my brother as I feel it's relevant for this. He's an amazing guy to us. He went above and beyond, sacrificing his teenage years to make sure we got what we needed. Even if his means were less than lethal. His first trouble with the law was at 19 for stealing to pay for my school dance trip. We never wanted for anything, we always had presents under the tree and a nice meal at Christmas, thanks to him. Always made sure we had gifts on our birthdays and would take us out to dinner. Even if he couldn't afford to order anything himself. We rarely missed a school trip as he'd always find a way to make it work. His girlfriend has told me that he puts a little bit of money aside each month for our eventual wedding dresses. I honestly couldn't have asked for a better big brother. I know all the pressure had an effect on him. That's the kind of guy he is, no sacrifice for us was too big. He's a big guy who regularly spends time in the gym after work. He's also associated with somewhere else. Rather unsavory characters. Whilst he has never ever so much as raised his voice as I've seen him go absolutely ape at some people before. A notable example is when I was 17, my then boyfriend smacked me and he was completely enraged. If my then boyfriend wasn't also a minor, I reckon he would have unalived him. He's very protective of us and I think sees us as his own children and his responsibility. It is because of this that I doubt he will act calmly about a full-grown man grooming his little sister. Whilst the possibility of anger worries me, his girlfriend was also worried about him getting sad, feeling like he didn't protect her as well as he should have / feeling like a failure. She said we need to be really careful about how we tell him this. My little sister asked me not to tell him, but there is no way I could do that. Plus his girlfriend already knows and is going to have more loyalty to him than to my little sister, so he's going to find out regardless of what I do. She said tonight when he gets home from work is probably the time to tell him. I guess what I'm asking is how do we tell him? I wish none of this had happened. I'm so anxious about the whole thing. I really don't want my big bro to be hurt and I don't want him to do anything stupid to the guy and get himself in trouble. I'm really lost here.